Today we are going to be talking about the next Zombies map, and what we're going to be talking about is actually two things. One is going to be the location, and the second one is going to be what most likely is going to be the premise of this story. And this actually makes a ton of sense why we're getting this information right now, because if you guys remember back to when Season 1 happened for Cold War, we got more intel added to Die Maschine, and in that intel was where we got our very first information on the location of Firebase Z and also the general premise of that story that was going to take place there, and that's where we learned it. And now fast forward to today, we recently had a new intel update, of course in Season 2, that gave us more information on the future of the story. And I think that's where we should go. And to do that, I'm going to play you guys the brand new Requiem audio log because it is interesting.
This is Heinrich Meyer, Station Chief, Berlin, Office of Requiem. Weaver, we have a developing situation over here. Reliable human places Dr. Alexandra Valentina of KGB Spetsnaz Omega Group here in West Berlin. She was observed scouting several locations in the city. Objective unknown. This is very distressing, to say the least. Dr. Valentina is directly involved with Omega's interdimensional research. If she is here expecting or intending for something to happen... Weaver, we have been very fortunate so far that most of Omega's operations have been in remote, rural areas. Berlin, on the other hand, is the focal point of the Cold War. The world is always watching us. If they were to launch an op here, I have a team trying to intercept her communications. I will alert you should they succeed.
So who you heard from, of course, as you guys saw, it was Heinrich Meyer, the Staff Chief of Berlin. So that alone is all like, okay, so we have the mention of Berlin. But before we get too far, we can't just say that, oh, he said Berlin, oh, that means the next map's going to be Berlin, right? No, we can't do that. But, of course, he himself explains why Berlin seems to be a targeted location for our next Zombies map, and that's because he said that he has spotted Dr. Valentina scouting out places in Berlin. And if you guys don't know who Valentina is, she's actually one of the heads of Omega Group, and of course she is directly involved, as it was said in the radio, with interdimensional research. So it's significant that she would show up in Berlin. Now, this alone probably confirms the idea that the next Zombies map is most likely going to be Berlin. And before we get into the story stuff, let's first talk about this idea of a zombie map being in Berlin. Of course, this is something that isn't entirely new. It's been speculated that a zombie map would eventually be in Berlin, and this seems to be exactly that. Of course, there's been some rumors that this Berlin map not only would come, but also parts of Kino would be there, which we don't know from what we've seen, because the only real connections we have with evidence that isn't supposedly leaks or rumors is that both this map is going to be in Berlin, and also we know that Kino took place near Berlin, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure when you load in it says somewhere near Berlin, but regardless, we do know that there is that Berlin connection. Either way, it's an interesting location, and it seems like it's incredibly likely. But of course, now we got to talk about the story of this. And before we move on to further radios, first I want to mention something else about this whole idea of Valentina and Omega Group showing up in Berlin, because this is something that I find incredibly strange at first glance, and we'll show you guys why it's not too strange in a little bit. But at first glance, it seems kind of strange, because why would Valentina show up in Berlin? That doesn't make sense, because if you think about the other locations that she was at, she went to, of course, End Station or Moscow, Poland, or where Die Maschine took place, which makes sense because that's where the first dimensional breach happened. That's what happened back during World War II, and they were trying to reopen that. So that makes sense. Of course, then she went over, and Omega Group went over to Outpost 25, which of course was Firebase Z. That made sense why they went there, because that one outbreak, or that one dimensional breach, was very unstable, which made it easier for them to enter in and out of the Dark Ether, so it made sense that they would go over there. And then of course you have the Ural Mountains and Outbreak, which makes sense why everybody is going over there, right? But this one is strange, because currently, and everything that we know about Berlin right now, is that it doesn't really have any outbreaks happening there. There's nothing to relate zombies to this location. Everything else is like, even what he said in the radio, that all the other outbreak zones has happened in remote locations, not where many people are. But Berlin, on the other hand, is not like that. There's much more people there, and there's no outbreaks or anything like that, which makes sense, because the outbreaks at this point are to an extent that they could be covered up by the US and the USSR government, as had been mentioned in multiple other intels, that this has been tried to be kept under wraps by both governments. So if there is something happening in Berlin, it currently hasn't happened, and this is something he's alluded to, because he says if she is here expecting or intending for something to happen. And that's what I want to further explore, and how I want to do it is by playing this other radio for you.
Is this everything? Surely there is more.
I assure you, Dr. Valentina, this is everything.
Research on membrane permutations? What about the particle distortion modules?
Everything you need on targeted dimensional breaching is there.
Otlично. Have it delivered to this address.
You're not taking it with you?
Is there a problem with my order?
No, I just thought...
Thinking is a dangerous thing, is it not, comrade? Have it delivered to the address. Make sure you are not discovered by Peck.
Believe me, he is half of the reason I am doing this.
And the other half?
Why, for the good of the motherland, of course.
Of course. For the motherland.
So this radio is actually kind of interesting, because the people in here, one of them is obviously Valentina, but the other person is Cluclay. And this person, if you were familiar with the Firebase Z story, you would actually recognize that name, because he is the guy who created the Ray-K, and he also worked with Peck at Firebase Z, or Outpost 25, which makes sense why he's, being hostile towards Peck, because they did not have a good relationship. But regardless, it's not really important, but it is something to at least point out. But the main thing I think we should take away from this radio, and why this radio is even being shown to us, is because of one line that Cluclay says. And of course, this is in regard to what he is giving to Valentina. And what he said is, of course, everything you need on targeted dimensional breaching is there. So this tells us what most likely Valentina is going to be doing when she enters into Berlin, or what she's going to do in Berlin. And this, of course, is to use this targeted dimensional breaching to probably open up a breach in Berlin. Now, why she wants to do this, I don't currently know. I mean, why you would want to open a rift in a populated area doesn't make too much sense, especially when you have the USSR government that you're supposed to have worked for, like, trying to keep this under wraps. Then why would you want to go out of your way to go and open a breach in a populated area? It doesn't make too much sense, but regardless, it is something that is seeming like what she's trying to do. Given it may not be that she's actually working under the recommendations of Omega Group. And the reason I say that is because she's working with Cluclay, and Cluclay was handing this dimensional breach, or whatever you want to call it, to her secretly, trying to keep it out of the knowledge of Peck, which is weird to say the very least. So considering those two things, this may not be an Omega Group operation. This may be a Valentina operation, and this idea is further explored in a piece of document which I want to read off for you guys. Now we're going to skip the start because this is just exactly what was mentioned in that first radio where they were trying to intercept messages from Valentina, and this is exactly that. Let's go ahead and read through this. And I think it's important to mention that right at the top of this it says translated from German, and we'll get to why that is probably important in a little bit. But what it says is Valentina, need an update on site. Unknown contact. Readings confirm membrane permittable. Has date been determined? Valentina, it's not up to me. Just keep your people ready to mobilize. Unknown contact. Acknowledged. However, some are starting to question if this is even possible. Valentina, eliminate doubters. No margin for error. Ground must be prepared. Unknown contact. Understood. I will make an example of them. Valentina, good, but do so quietly. Do not lose element of surprise. So this is, again, interesting, and the things that I find most interesting about this is not really the conversation itself, because it's interesting, don't get me wrong, but it's further explored on what she's trying to do in previous radios. But what I find interesting is who she's talking to, and it's this unknown contact. And I think we could get a little bit of information of who this unknown contact could possibly be, or at least his relationship with at least the language he speaks, by the fact that it says it's translated from German. So it seems like to me that this unknown contact is German, which would mean that Valentina seems to be working with people who are most likely not associated with Omega Group, which again is that whole suspicion of, is Valentina even working under the direction of Omega Group? Of course, we could say that, but then at the same time, when the unknown contact asks if the date has been determined, she says it's not up to me. So it's again confusing because we just don't know if she's working under the direction of Omega Group or not, because at points it seems like she's not, and other points it seems like she is. So because of that, it is interesting to say the very least. But regardless, it gives us this idea of what's probably going to happen and the general premise of the story of this upcoming map. And what it seems that is that Kuklai gave Valentina this device that could open up breaches at will. And she has decided, for one reason or another, to open one of the breaches in Berlin. And how she's going to do it is to help with this unknown contact that seems to be involved in some German organization. And she's doing it with their help. And because of that, it's really interesting, and I don't really know what to make of it. Of course, the fact that Valentina is in Berlin herself, maybe that means we're going to have another situation like Peck on Outpost 25, or I guess Firebase Z, where he was talking to us on the map and we heard him and all that stuff. So I wonder if Valentina may play another role like that when we actually play the upcoming map, but we're going to have to wait and see. Either way, guys, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts and opinions on what you've heard here today throughout these 3 pieces of intel. Are you guys interested in what's going on? Not interested? Excited? Any theories, ideas, anything like that? Leave those all down in the comments. But anyways, that's about it for me. If you guys did enjoy the video, definitely do all the normal YouTube stuff. Like, subscribe, bell, share, and all that great stuff. But I'm going to go, and I'll catch you guys in the next stream video. Over the heck, baby, and later, guys.